I want to welcome you to the next Positive Gravity. I'm Doug, and I'm starting a new project today. I've had this for a while. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. You might notice there's a lot of texture here. This is the bark side of the tree. There's some really big pockets. I can fit my whole finger down in that one, and it actually runs all the way through here. Doesn't come out this side, but it does just begins to show up right here, and it definitely shows up on this edge. So there's a few fissures inside here. There's kind of an interesting vein in the wood here. I think that's a bark inclusion going through there. So, you know, I could have just gone the easy route and turned like a thin plate out of this and it would have been beautiful. But I would have lost all this interesting stuff up on top, and I didn't want to do that. I want to retain some of that in the piece somehow. I don't really want to do a live edge with this. So here's what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. Check this out. So I've got a piece like that, and what I would like to do is pour resin over the top of it. So I'll fill this with resin. That'll fill all these giant voids and allow me to turn through them, and also secure the middle of the piece where there's some deep cracks. The trouble with that is there's lots of texture here. There's going to be way too much possibility of getting air bubbles in the resin. So unlike most of the time where I don't really need to seal it before I do a casting, I really think I need to seal this somehow. And with all this texture, I can't just like paint on a thin coat of epoxy. I need to do something else. And without really knowing, and I've done a little research, I haven't really nailed down what's a good idea, but I think what I'm going to do is just pour and paint some thinned, like maybe a ½ pound cut of shellac throughout here, and then flip it over and kind of let it towel it, drain it, whatever I can do to get all the voids to sort of clear out. I don't want to fill them in. Let that dry, and then pour my resin on top of that, and especially because I'm planning on using a dark colored resin, like kind of a gradient black to gray. I don't want to stain this pretty wood, so if I can help it, I don't want to do that. I want to protect the wood, so I'm going to try shellac. If you're screaming out there right now saying, "No, no, don't do that," I wish I could hear you. Maybe someday I'll do a live show and I'll be able to hear you. Anyway, once I get that poured, then the next step would be to kind of envision what that piece will look like. And, I'm kind of thinking like a flat-ish globe-shaped vase with a slightly bigger top so I can more easily get to the turning on the edges. And, in the end, it would look something like that. So that's the plan. We'll see how this goes. Definitely in uncharted territory here. So, if you know how to do this better than I do, which probably most people do because I've never done it, please leave me a comment and let me know what's worked for you in a situation like this. I like to learn those things, but I also would like my other viewers to see it and learn as well. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's get started. You thought I was just going to do it on this piece, didn't you? Well, guess what? I have a little scrap piece. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is clean all this out, wire brush it the same way I prepped this. This has all been deflaked and cleaned out, and then I wire brushed it, and then I air blew it. I'll do the same thing to this and tape it up and make a little well, and then try a little resin pour in here, and we'll see what happens. So let's do that first as an experiment and see what happens. We'll learn if the shellac method actually works. So let's do it. Also, if you find my videos useful, if you learn something from them, or at least you find them entertaining, I would appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button. That helps me a lot, and I do truly appreciate the subscribes. So thanks for those of you who have, and for those of you who haven't, hit that button. All right, let's get to this. We're all going to learn something here. All right, everyone. Welcome back. It's the next day. This is the little trial piece that I cast yesterday in the video earlier. Looks like it worked really well, actually. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's no bleeding into the wood at all, as far as I can tell. The color change at this part of the wood is from the wood itself, so that's a cut off of this piece. From yesterday, and so you can see there's this coloring on the outer part of the wood, and that's why I want to keep this feature. Anyway, the test with shellac seemed to work. I don't have a control where I didn't use the shellac, so I don't know if the shellac did anything, but it didn't appear to hurt anything. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that on this piece. Let's talk about this piece. So this guy, I'm ready to work on it. It's all cleaned out as best I can. A couple problems. It's too big to fit in my lathe the way it is right now. In my pressure pot. The pressure pot's only 12 inches, and this is about 13 inches corner to corner. So my first thought was, I'll put it on the lathe and I'll turn it around, but the problem with that is I'm going to be cutting right through here, and there's not a lot holding this on. So once I start cutting this corner off where all the wood is, I'm going to have this piece kind of flapping in the breeze, and I think I'm going to lose this whole side from here over. So that's bad. We don't want that. So choices aren't great. I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'll shellac this tonight, and then I think I'm going to sleep on it and think about it. But I think so this is a 1 pound cut of shellac. And in case you didn't catch it earlier in the video, I'm doing this to try to prevent bubbles from forming in my resin. So let's talk about shellac. What am I using? I'm using this product. It's dried flakes, shellac, from the Shellac Shack. Happens to be a place, I believe they're right here in Oregon. Shellac is actually made by a bug. It's made by an insect in, I think, Indonesia called the lac bug. So they secrete this. People harvest it. We get to use it. It's on food. It's on all kinds of things. So I'm using a 1 pound cut. So what does that mean? One of the benefits of using flakes is you can make the shellac as thick or thin as you want. 1 pound cut is a pretty light cut. Looks like we got batteries. So a 1 pound cut is 1 ounce of flakes into a cup of alcohol. So I need 1 ounce. Let's just use this. One ounce. And 1. We got our alcohol. I know from experience this is about a cup up to the top of the tape there. Call that good. These flakes will take a day, at least a few hours to dissolve. I'm just going to leave them here till tomorrow. Yeah, it's probably good enough for casting. This piece did not come off. This should now fit in my pressure pot. It's a little bit cone shaped, but I didn't want to take off more wood than I needed to. So I think we're good to go. I'm wondering if I shouldn't cactus juice this, but I'm afraid the cactus juice will just end up filling in all these little nooks and crannies. And you'll see that in the final turning, so I'm not gonna cast it. I'm not gonna stabilize it right now. leakage. Not bad though, just a little bit. Hopefully that didn't leave a void inside. Definitely generated some heat. Still feel it's warm. One thing's for sure, this thing's heavy, so it's going to need support. And there's where my center shows up, so that's not great. one. So this is where I'm at with this piece. It's started hollowing it, but unfortunately my experiment with the shellac to prevent bubbles did not work. So I remember this piece worked great here. And I don't know if it's because it's a smaller piece or because it's a different resin. This is Alumilite clear cast. This is Alumilite clear slow. This has like I think something like a 12-hour demold time. This one has a 4-hour demold time. This generated a fair amount of heat. But for whatever reason, I did get some bubbling between the wood and the resin. So let me bring you in for a little bit of a closer look at it. Hopefully the camera will focus this close, but there's along here there's some pitting here. There's a couple cracks that opened up down here. They were already in the wood. I just turned them and exposed them, so another bit there. So, you know, it's not terrible. So what I have is I picked up a wax stick, and you heat this up, and I'll be drizzling it into these voids to fill them with black. I did put some thin CA in there to seal up the wood, so we shouldn't get any bleeding of color into the wood. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and wax this, and I've never used this before, so we'll see. I also applied some CA glue right here. There's a punky, you can kind of hear it. It's a little bit of a punky spot right there, so I put some CA on that to secure that. So let's get to the stick. Okay. So I'm just dripping some of this in the voids here, making sure that it fills entirely. you want to establish the outside shape of your vessel before you do your hollowing, but in this case it was a little bit different because I had that maple branch in the center to try to use up some space, so it just wasn't all resin, which is expensive. But I didn't want that maple in my finished piece, so I needed to hollow that out and get rid of the maple so I could see how much resin I had left to work with before I finished the outside shape. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm working on removing the maple and establishing the beginnings of an inside shape, but I didn't want to go for the final inside shape. I just wanted to remove the maple, checking the thickness with my caliper, and then, you know, once I had the maple removed and I was getting beginnings of a shape, I moved back to turning the outside because now I know how much resin I have left to work with, and I wanted a little more curvature in the neck of the vase here, so I'm actually removing more material from the outside now, even though the piece is already hollowed, so that's somewhat atypical. So yeah, adding more curvature to the neck, and then I'll move on to doing the inside like you normally would to match the shape of the outside. So here I'm starting to work my way deeper into the vase. I've got my curved finishing tool there, our hollowing tool, and I'm working further down into the vase and doing less and less work up near the lip. As things get thinner, you want to do less and less work up at the lip because it will start vibrating as the piece gets thinner and thinner. So yeah, usually work on finishing up near the top of the vessel and then work your way down, finishing further in and finally finishing near the bottom.